I like it.
All the recordings. Well, that's good news, man. Anyone else? Everyone else slacking? No deals for anyone else? No. Oh, good times. All right. What we're going to talk about today is really going to be part 2 of our advanced series in underwriting. So for any of you guys that had the chance to be on the last call, last Thursday's call, where it was me and Reggie diving really deep into the intricate details of this one particular deal. So the deal was a 56 unit in Orange Beach, Alabama. And basically what we did was we went through the entire scenarios tab and covered quite literally everything from asking price, purchase price. I mean, line by line, we went down and talked about everything in pretty granular detail. And we focused a lot of effort on the what Reggie calls his affordability metrics and the rent market analysis, and combining those two things. We talked about how we actually came up with that number in the first place. So any of you that missed that last call, I encourage you to go back and make sure you understand that, because we've gone over a lot of basics of underwriting, but really what we're trying to do here is go over in really granular detail how we come up with certain numbers, what each thing looks like, and how you can get as granular as possible, not only just on the upfront underwriting, but even on the back end when you're thinking about creating pro formas and operations and true execution of what it is you're creating in the first place. So Reggie, even though he's unable to be with us today because he is literally jamming out on the bass guitar at like the Hard Rock in Biloxi, he put together what he calls his rent matrix, which dives really deep into the specifics of pretty much a month-to-month basis where rent actually is. So I wanted to go over the rent matrix with you guys. That was basically going to be another resource that we're also going to include in the mastermind as something that you guys can utilize when you're doing your own underwriting for your own deals. But then even out past that, once we kind of cover everything that we can cover within that, what I wanted to do is just go deeper into the underwriting. So surpass the first tab that we're on, scenarios, and go into summary, go into P&L, and just kind of progress with the underwriting of this deal. So Matt, do you have anything to add there?
No, yeah, I think you guys are going to really love it. If you've not seen his the rent matrix that we used before, I think it's going to add a lot of clarity in understanding how to project out rents, because a lot of people just use assumptions, and this uses a little more specific analysis. So I'm excited to jump into it for him.
Here I am trying to pull it up, struggling. Don't mind me. I'll pull that up in a second.
I got it up if you want me to drive too. I don't care either way.
So this is his rent matrix. If everyone can see this. So if you guys remember, we were here yesterday, last Thursday. We stayed in the scenarios tab pretty much the entire time and covered the marketing package, the version, some of the pro forma. We didn't cover all of it because a lot of the pro forma is coming to be a part of this rent matrix we're about to cover. And we covered the offer tab. We didn't get too granular into how we actually came up with these numbers individually, but we did get granular on how we came up with these numbers, which is why this is a little bit different than this. But if any of that's confusing, you can go back and watch the previous call and get clarity there. So the rent matrix is basically 1529 was our estimated proposed market rent. After we did a deeper dive into the rental market, analysis, we determined that 1529 is what we can actually achieve from where they are today, which was 1145 is where they're at today. So a pretty big gap in where we could actually take this particular property, all being 2 bed, 2 baths, 1150 square feet. So if I go back to this, we basically took each one of these, looked at them on a unit by unit level, and we can get even more granular with this particular model here, as we have other different types of unit mixes. But this one was simple, being all 2s. And we pretty much took each individual month and estimated where we were going to be at from a rent collection perspective, all the way from August, estimating we were going to, close on the deal right before or during August, all the way for a full 12 months, pushing out to July. So these little red blank ones is basically the end of the lease. So we're estimating that we're not going to be making any money for that unit in that month, and that it's just going to take 30 days to fully turn it and get where we need to be to bring in the new market rent tenant at the higher price point. So that's where you'll see a lot of these numbers too. This is what they're currently collecting. And then once it hits red, we end the lease officially ends, and then we're updating the rent. So, when we go by the annual basis, when we're looking at the P&L, it gives us a wider 30,000 foot view of the actual numbers of where we think we could take things. But putting together something like this really gives you the granular month to month actual income that you're going to be collecting, which we'll cover in just a second, and what all these graphs mean and how all that actually plays a part in underwriting in the first place. So all the red ones is basically when a lease ends, and then we move and we bring a new tenant in and we bring them in at market rent. All these little, Reggie called them blue ones. I think they're like purple, but all these purple ones, blue ones, whatever you want to call it, these are basically the month to month people. So we're just ending it on this particular date, their month to month lease, and taking it up to market. Now, we didn't want to take all the month to month individuals all in one fell swoop and have such a big drastic hit on occupancy, depending on where where our marketing budget's at and how much turnover we can actually do that fast. We should want to inundate our leasing, marketing, maintenance team all at one time. So we spread that out a little bit over the course of this year, all the month to month people. And then of course it's after the month to month, then they go up to market. So you can just see, and being able to get this granular, you really get a much deeper, much more crystal clear picture of how much income you're actually going to be making, especially for the first year. And we could even take this and we could do it for the next year and the next year and the next year. We could continue to pro forma this out on a month to month basis. And we actually have a sheet that we're going to give you guys as well, which I don't think we've given to you yet, but it will be a month to month pro forma of after you actually close the deal, when we get deeper into asset management and operations. But as we're just talking about underwriting, you see in its most basic form, you add all these numbers up, you see how much money you're actually collecting in NOI, or technically this is gross potential income and gross rent each month. So you can actually get to see the trend of it going up. You see it actually go down a little bit because we have a handful of units that end up not making any money. But then you see it go back up, it goes down a little bit, down a little bit. Then there's a big jump here with a bunch of leases coming. And obviously we get all the way up to 79.5, almost $80,000 a month, giving us around this number. And then you can just look at the rest of this, all your physical occupancies, economic occupancy, what that actually plays out to be, what the total is over off to the side here, market rent for each month, how the market rent actually changes depending on which units are at market and which aren't. Current lease rent, how many vacant units you have. It basically tells you everything, right? And then the graphs are here basically to tell you the exact same thing, just a quick view of how many units are vacant. This is basically month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. So taking you across what this is actually doing, seeing loss to lease decrease as it goes up, and seeing rubs increase as we're charging more for rubs. You can also see that over here with $80 every unit being charged for rubs. And this $80 is being charged almost immediately across this portfolio. So Matt, did you have anything to add to the matrix here, the benefits, pros, cons, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to highlight, obviously the granularity there is one of the big benefits here when we're looking forward. When we're talking about the reasoning behind basically there's two, when we're building out this rent matrix, there's two tenant profiles that we're looking at. There's the ones that have a current lease in place, and there's the month to month. Now, like Josh said, we could technically on day one pick out all the people. We try to renew all the people who are month to month tenants and try to force them to sign a lease or get out. Right? We have that option as owners to say, all right, guys, here's your new lease. It's time or get out. However, that would be a big burden on the property. So, what do you guys think would be your thought process for choosing which units you would choose first for the renewal versus the ones you might intentionally delay for renewal? What do you think the biggest variable there is?
How much work the unit has to do and what the upside might be, when you do the rehab.
That's a good variable for sure. What else? Give me one more. Any other variables there?
Longer tenants, folks that have been there for at least a couple of years already.
Tenant profile, right? In general, like do they pay on time every month? How about the most obvious one in my mind? How much they're paying in rent? Like, let's say the market rent we're trying to get to is 1529, but we have 20 month-to-month tenants, and we'll say 5 of them are paying $900 a month. and then 15 of them are paying $1,300 a month. Which one do you think you would want to renew first? The lost, you want to capture that loss to lease as quickly as possible. So you're going to intentionally, we're going to take all of those variables into play, and we'll kind of map that out intentionally as you flow that out. And I say intentionally, meaning this is a perfect world, right? So in a perfect world, this is how we lay it out, but you're going to have some tenants leave early. You're going to have some tenants not pay. They're going to get evicted, right? So this isn't the perfect, you never know what's going to happen in the future, but this is the best way we found to kind of project granularly going forward. Now, from the month to month, I think we had a question saying, what happens if the 30 days is up and it still hasn't, the tenant still hasn't found housing? Then they need to leave. They've been non-renewed at that point. So it's probably an eviction at that point. Where was I going with that though? Oh, that's right. So we intentionally build in 1 month of vacancy for every lease that we're renewing, whether it be the month to month or whether it be the actual leased up properties. What that equates to, for those of you who are in like the single family world, 1 month out of every 12 is we're effectively planning on 8% vacancy per unit per year. And so that's just kind of what we build in our built-in vacancy rate. So 1 divided by 12 is roughly 8% for that vacancy factor. Now, there's totally a chance that, depending on the market, like Reggie alluded to last week, in a perfect world, we have it leased up like within a week. We have a turn and you're leased up and you have less than a month of vacancy. But obviously there's a chance that some of them may remain vacant for 2, 3, 4, 5 months. But we found that this is kind of a happy medium for us kind of projecting forward. It's not necessarily conservative, but it's also not too much buffer that you're being unrealistic there. All right, let's see, knock out some questions that have popped up. So we talked about Leo's. What happens if the lease is up and still tenant hasn't paid yet? I mean, that's a non-paying tenant at that point, so they'd be non-renewed and kicked out and evicted. Also, do you give month-to-month tenants the option to enter a new lease at any market rate if they stay? This is something we're currently doing. So one of our properties, we have an 88 unit up in Montgomery. 28 of our 88 units are being are leases that are coming expired this quarter, in Q2, which is ending in the next week. And this was the big emphasis item with our property manager saying, hey guys, we have some really good tenants in there. However, they're paying $300, $400, $500, sometimes $600 less than our market rent. And so we really need to capture that loss to lease that we're currently realizing. And so we would like to keep the good tenants, but we do need to get the market to get closer to market rent. And so we told the property manager kind of they had the leeway of plus or minus about $100 in rent. And so if it's a really good tenant and they just really cannot pay the full market rent, we're going to bump them up. And we gave the property manager kind of the leash to say, okay, you're allowed up to $100 less than market rent to try to keep those good tenants in there. Because it's not just keeping good tenants in there. I think it was Oliver who said, whoever mentioned, or maybe Derek mentioned the turns cost money, right? So even if it's a crappy tenant who is still paying his mortgage or paying his lease, then if we kick him out, that's another $5,000 maybe in a turn that we need to deal with. So it is a balance when you're doing these bulk renewals in your leases, and so that is something you will take into consideration with your tenants. You may allow that a little bit less than market rent just to maintain that cash flow.
Hey Matt, quick question for you.
Yeah, good.
So you said you give a leeway of up to $100 for good tenants, but how do you do that with fair housing? Like, how do you work with fair housing laws to make that happen? How do you allow that leeway to fluctuate basically from tenant to tenant without running into issues?
So how are you're saying like what if my property manager is being racist and giving discounts to all one race and not another?
Well, no. I'm not. No, I'm talking about how, like, if you're fluctuating rent from tenant to tenant and there's not a set standard in that practice, or if there is a set standard, I'm not sure. But in that case, would you not run into issues with fair housing laws because you're treating certain residents differently than others?
What we really comes down to is money. So we put it on the property manager to make sure they're abiding by all the laws in that sense. I don't know of any. Trying to think of what instance of fair housing we might be breaking in that sense. I understand what you're saying because everyone needs to be treated equally. And the reasoning for people not being able to pay a certain amount of rent, it was most likely a percentage of their income. And so maybe that's how we're the property manager is justifying these exceptions, if you will. We do have, the standard is the market rate as far as, hey, here's what the rent is. And if you can afford it, that's great. But even when we have new tenants that come in, we give concessions for some tenants, to bulk up our property when we need. So there are definitely times when the non-market rate is accepted.
You're essentially structuring this as like a concession for renewal in
Correct.
a way.
Yes.
Okay, I gotcha. I'm
Yep.
following you now. Thanks.
Trying definitely to avoid favoritism, absolutely, and any sort of biases when it comes to laws, but it comes down to just keeping as the best tenant profile you can while increasing to market as close to market rate as possible.
Yeah, I actually, so I say that, and I'll keep this short, just not
Good.
take up time. I say that from a situation where we just recently, actually, we went to court with a resident who was friends with one of their neighbors, and the neighbor was what you would call a good tenant, and we wanted to retain them. And they had paid on time, but the delta between market rent and their rent was like $550. We had no choice. I mean, it just would not work for us not to increase their rate to market rate, even though their apartment, wasn't renovated or anything. But then their neighbor, we had a similar situation, and it was discovered that the assistant property manager at the time had given some favoritism to one of the residents over another resident, and we got fined a pretty hefty fee in that situation because of a price difference at renewal.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's completely valid. That's a good point to bring up. And like I said, it's one of the reasons we try to hire solid property managers to justify whatever our intent is to make, hopefully it comes across legally. The last thing we want to do is actually have intentional biases in that regard when it comes to any sort of fair housing thing. So the last thing I'm trying to imply here. So that's a great point to bring up, though.
Yeah. I get more of what you're talking about now, though. I mean, you're structuring it as a concession to renew, essentially, which makes a lot more sense.
And what we'll even often do, especially if it's a good tenant, we'll say, hey, like, you've been paying on time for the past 2 years. I understand that your income is X, and let's say market rent is $15.29 in this example. But I know it's going to take you over 45% of your income to cover that. So we're willing to give you a $100 discount. And hey, you know what? For you guys to stay, we'll even throw in some new countertops, or we'll throw in whatever we need to do. Maybe update your bathroom, and that's what we've done with some of our tenants in our 34 unit. We've to entice them to stay and go up to market rate rather than concessions and money. We'll just give concessions in the form of upgrades in the property.
That's actually a really, really cool idea.
Yeah,
because you were going to do upgrades in it anyway, right?
Exactly. Whether they leave or not, it's actually a cheaper upgrade because we were going to have to upgrade more in the property if we had to turn it off.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. All right. So let's see what the other questions we got here. Chris was asking, if the deal closes, do you provide this analysis to your property manager and have an Absolutely. So this is going to be part of our business plan that we give to the property manager. Now, this is created effectively in a vacuum, not knowing tenant profiles. We can see money, right? So this is kind of our big picture plan, and this gets the point across. The property managers, they're not going to be executing this by the unit, to the T, but at least gives them the idea of how specific you are as an owner and as an asset manager. Hey guys, this is my plan, and this is what I want to adhere to as much as possible. And at least it's the baseline that on a month-to-month basis or a week-to-week basis, when you're having these update meetings, your KPI meetings with your property manager, this is something you can come into play and at least talk to a baseline. Otherwise, your discussions are, hey, how's vacancy? How's our collections? You're talking like in such generalities, it's tough to really track trends and from a baseline kind of business plan. So Chris, that's a good question. Absolutely, we do. Deepak was asking, where do we account for the number of unit turns, rehab, example, like 2 units per month, and execute? So this is exactly where we would do it. So in this game plan right now, Reggie has not built in any sort of rehabs in this. The rehabs could be the 30 days. And we say could be, meaning this would be your standard rehab. Like let's say it's a week rehab of paint and flooring, your classic paint, flooring, and maybe replace an appliance or something like that. That's something you can confidently say you can get done in a week. Ideally in a day, to be honest with you, but that never happens. So If you had larger rehabs, so let's say a part of our business plan in this case was to we're going down to the studs in every one of these units, and to who was it? Who had it? Was it Deepak? I think you're the one who said you had the 16 unit. Someone had one that you're doing. Who's adding washer and dryers? Who was that?
I know Greg had the 16 unit. Deepak
Was it
had,
Greg?
I
Was it
think,
you that's adding washer and dryers?
34.
Yeah, that's right, man. Washer and stackables in the units. Yeah, and we're
Is that all you're doing? Have you calculated like how long is it going to take per unit to turn it?
no, that's not all we're doing. We're gonna spend some money. We're gonna do floors, countertops. Yeah, exactly. No,
So for you, like for
it's
something like
60
that,
Yeah,
yeah. So something like that, I might account for 2 months, per unit that we need to turn.
right.
And maybe even 3 months. If it's going to be 2 months to actually rehab, I'm going to plan for a month to actually lease it up.
That's
So
exactly right. Yeah.
So I'm the guy who poo-poos on Josh's and Reggie's ideas, and I try to make them more conservative. So if they say it's going to take 1 month, I say, okay, it's great. Let's build in 2 months into our game plan, because that's just the way I think, because naturally, as shit happens, right? Like stuff happens, delays happen, vacancies happen. And I would much rather be surprised in the positive than I would be surprised in the negative. So that's just my mentality.
Right.
So yeah, I would definitely build those in this one that we're currently tracking that Josh just stopped sharing the screen, but you can see everyone which is a single block of time. Those block of time would just be extended to account for any sort of rehab needed. All
Yeah,
right.
Derek was asking about month-to-month leases. Assuming the month-to-month leases automatically occur due to the contract term expiring, is there a way to write into the contract that month-to-month will be at a higher rate, closer to or even above market?
I
There's
don't know
really
of any laws that restrict you building into your lease
There's really no lease though,
increase.
right? If it's month to month, they're just like paying every month.
You could put that into your lease. You could totally build that into your lease. I don't know of any laws restricting it. Not something I've
It's still a
seen.
lease. I mean, sorry, it's like single family though, is that not right? It's still the same type of lease,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it
totally.
switches to month, but all the terms are still in effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. You could, in one of your terms in your lease, you could say at the expiration of this lease, we'll continue on a month-to-month basis with some sort of increasing factor. A $25 per month increase for the first 5 months, and then you could build that into your lease. I don't see why you couldn't build that into your lease.
Right, and the reason is because they're a less secure lease, so less secure tenant, aren't they? And it would hopefully encourage them to get back onto a re-signing a longer lease.
Yeah, 100%. I don't see any issues with that. I mean, sometimes, like I just signed a lease for I bought a 9 unit in Niceville by Destin, Florida, and I signed a 6-month lease intentionally with my one of my tenants who had been there for 2 years. She thinks she's getting married in the next 6 months. Her boyfriend hasn't even proposed to her. And so I'm like, sure, I'll sign a 6-month lease, and then we'll just go month to month after that. But that helped me justify my rent increase because it was a shorter lease, and she was completely fine with the extra $100 a month or whatever it was.
And
So
just to follow up, that rent roll, is that not an unusually high percentage of month to month?
yes, yeah, and that kind of goes to show you how it's currently being managed. As an owner, I would not want. I don't know what the percentage is here. I'm sure sure Reggie has it somewhere here. Great lease rate. I don't see it. I don't see it as a quick number we could figure out.
Josh, can you reshare that screen, please?
Let me see here. Now
What are you guys trying to figure out?
30. So it's 30
How
out of
many
the
months
56.
to
So it's
month?
almost half. Almost half
Wow.
of it's more than half of those units are month to month.
That's crazy.
Yeah, super high. And to your point, it's a dangerous tenant profile, because literally in 30 days you could lose half of your tenants legally.
Exactly.
So yeah, sorry to keep hearing my dog barking in the background. He's a blind old 17-year-old little dog. All right. So that is my thoughts, my additions on the big picture's top of the rent matrix. It is something you can use as a business plan. You can build in your rehabs into it, and visually it does things exactly like Derek just alluded to. You're like, holy crap, like I can see visually there's a problem here, right? There's a lot of month-to-month tenants. Like, what is going on? And right away you can start to visually pick these things up. rather than sometimes you look at a rent roll and like your month to month is indicated by like something, or maybe it's not even indicated at all in rent roll. And so you're like, it's hard to start to determine, or the only indication is the lease expiration. And so you got to kind of count, hey, how many of these actually expired? And that's effectively what Reggie did here. You go through the rent roll and you figure out what's going on with each specific unit, lease expiration and amounts there. All right, at the bottom, Josh already alluded to everything that I would have. It's just nice to see. These are the metrics that I like to like. What's the word I'm looking for? Realistically look. So when you go to like physical occupancy, so the top of the gray box there, Josh, at the bottom. So physical occupancy, like what is a realistic number? I know Reggie and Josh went over the comps last week, and most of the comps were at 95, 97, 99% occupancy. And so when I'm seeing things that are closer to 90% occupancy, I feel much more confident. Again, I always want to add a buffer to what the market's doing with my pro forma going forward. In the near term, I'm pretty confident. You'll see in the long term, I think Josh and Reggie, they plan for like, I can't remember what you guys said for your long-term pro forma last week, or not pro forma, when you guys were running the numbers for long-term occupancy. But for me,
it was like 8% or something.
Yeah, 8%. That's what's one thing commonly that Josh and Reggie will send my way. They'll say, okay, we're projecting an 8% total vacancy, economic and physical. And I'll say, hey, that's great, guys, but I can't trust that we're going to be able to maintain an 8% physical and economic vacancy. So how will we build in 12% or 15%? Do we still work? Are we still
takes a
cash?
dump on my optimism.
Yeah. It just, I mean, if you look at the historical norms, it is yeah, sure. Right now we might be doing well on occupancy, but the historical norms are going to say otherwise, especially as properties age. You might not have the capex to inject in 10 years into this property to get it up to market rent or get it up to market demand to really demand the occupancy you're trying to predict. So anyways, all right, so that's one thing, physical occupancy. Next one, economic vacancy there. You can see coming across the board, it's just a nice little trend. Same discussion we just had with physical occupancy versus economic vacancy. Market rent. So what Reggie did here for market rent, I don't like to do this, but Reggie does because he's super granularly minded. You'll see if you want to click the cell where it says market rent 85, the next one over to the right, Josh. So he took the market rent of just adding all of the units and going to 85,000. Totally get that, right? So every unit, 56 units times 1529 gives you 85,624. And that's totally fine. But what he does, you'll see in the next month, it goes up a little bit, right? He does 3% in annually increase divided by 12. So he's doing these super granular kind of like increases per month, which is understandable and legitimate from a big picture perspective. But you know how annoying that's going to be to your property manager. All right, guys, new market rent is now $38.06 versus $39.27 last month. Like, I'm just not a big picture fan of like these intentional small increases, and I totally get it from the perspective that Reggie does it, and it's just his mentality. My mentality is, okay, market rent for this year, I'm hopefully conservative in assuming the market rent's going to stay the same all year. Hopefully that's a conservative assumption, and then I'll start the next year with maybe a 2% or a 3% increase, whatever it happens to be. Versus kind of slowly building in these numbers. That's one more way that I like to be conservative with my numbers. And so you can see when people are renewing, actually what he's showing, it doesn't affect the renewals actually. So the way he did is fine. Because he's shown all renewals are the maximum of 1529. He is just showing the actual market rent increase, which is fine. But again, different strokes for different folks. I like to keep it standard. He does a slow rise to a 3% increase there. All right, current lease rent. Go ahead.
Sorry, Matt, you'd be losing rent though if you only update every year, though, wouldn't you? You'd be losing quite a lot if the market's moving.
I'm not saying don't real time update your market rent. I am 100% a proponent of real time updating your market rent. I'm not going to update my market rent by $2 a month though. You know what I mean? Right. However, in my pro forma, and Reggie, I was kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth. What Reggie did is right. What Reggie did is saying across this entire year, if you look at the very last row, the max he's assuming anyone's going to pay is 1529, which is right now, hopefully a conservative estimate. Hopefully by the end of the year, market rent has gone to 1575 or whatever it happens to be, or 1600 by the end of the year. However, what he's showing is the the actual market rate that we're assuming for our loss to lease, which is that third row cell in the dark gray area, that market rent is where he's calculating the loss to lease from, is that market rent is growing slowly. It's a linear growth to 3% to the end of the year is what he's doing there. So I actually like the way Reggie did this in this case. I thought initially when I was looking at it, I thought he was slowly bumping up every month's market rent in our assumptions, but he didn't do that. So he was conservative in his approach for what we're going to show for income. And he was also conservative in his approach with the way he was doing his market rent. So we're showing a larger loss to lease, which is what I want to see I want to be more conservative in my assumption. I want to show the highest market rent versus the lower income. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that's clear in everyone's mind. If you have any questions on that, please speak up, because I want to make sure that point's clear.
So that market rent is your 1529. What you're saying is the average from the collection of other properties in your area. That's basically how we're saying. So the market rent is this, then you're going to discount for your vacant units, those rents, and then that's their loss to lease vacancy loss.
Yeah, Josh, can I share my screen just so I can kind of point to the cells a little bit easier?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Just so he can take over.
I'll happily give it back to you after this. All right. So what I was saying here is it's nice if you look at a cell here, like this random cell, this random unit here. This is a unit that's whatever is vacant currently. He says it's going to take us 1 month to renew it, and now we have a new tenant at 1529. So in 1 month we're going to have a new market rent of 1529. He's also assuming at the end of the year, like this person who then a month tenant that we renew, and at the very last month of the year is also 1529. So I like the way he's being conservative and so I'm assuming the best case scenario in our numbers right now is we're getting 1529 at the end of the year, and we're not kind of bumping up that and this slow linear increase. However, what he considers in this row here, market rent, this market rent, the reason he has this row here is to calculate the loss to lease.
Right.
So this loss to lease, if you see, is going to be based off market rent here that he has justified minus the total income. And so I like the way he's done that to where real time we should, what this tells me is real time, we should be excelling, and some of our units at the end of the year should be 1575, maybe even 1600. And so we should be performing better than our pro forma, better than our rent matrix here. And that's what I want to set myself up for, that type of success. And I think it's conservative, but not overly conservative. You know, we're not saying, hey, by the end of the year, we're going to be at 1,300 a month, which is like just overly conservative for what the market is pushing out right now.
Right.
It seems like he has it on line 64.
Line 64. This is what he's calling current market rent. So right here in line 64, he's saying this is the actual leased rent versus what he's calling market rent. So yeah, he's showing what the market rent is, 1570, right? And he's saying this is what I'm assuming market rent's going to be, but what we're actually going to be leasing in his pro forma is 1529 on average across all 56 units.
Right.
Does that all check out? I just want to make sure it's all clear with the numbers here, guys.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Other things you'll see down here, he's showing vacant units. It's just good to see kind of expectations there. You want to try to, this is the reason he has this cell. This helps to, when you're deciding how many per month, when you're starting to do these month to month, it's just nice to have that single line cell. Be like, okay, cool. Here's how many we're doing, and we're separating them evenly. So every month we want to have about this many units to turn effectively is what that is. Loss to lease we talked to already. Vacancy loss. Same thing this is just a monetary value of the numbers up here, and then RUBS, which he was slowly building in as well. So I know you guys talked last week about, using the RUBS to increase your other income when it comes to electrical and water. And I think you talked even internet last week. I perused the call from last week. So that's just him kind of slowly building in this number as well. And so he's looking at, what's the way he's doing this? Oh, the number of units turned times the $80, right? So that's what he's doing. Then he's adding that to the previous one, because his assumption here was $80 in RUBS per unit. And so he's saying this first month we turned 6 units. So now those 6 units we're making now $80 in RUBS for those 6 units. The next month we're going to have a combined 10 units that we're making $80 in RUBS per month. Does that make sense? So he's just kind of flowing that out, and that's how he's calculating his other income to get the rubs in there as a factor. Initially, it's a non-factor, and it's a small number, but by the end of the year, it's a significant number, right? You're looking at 4,000 is not an insignificant number in the grand scheme of things. Okay, and then like Josh already alluded to, the bottom here is just nice graphical representation. It's nice you can pick outliers if something is super wonky, or that's it. And you kind of check trends and all that fun stuff. Cool. Josh, I'll give it back to you. I just want to kind of pointy talk you a little bit easier as we talk about those numbers. Any questions on any of that, guys? Let's make sure this is super clear, because we will pass this to you as a good tool to use.
Look like Deepak did have a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there might have been some other one popped up. Would it be good to make would be good to make that year-over-year rent growth as a variable we can edit? 100%. This is. You'll see that the way Reggie and I create a lot of our Excel spreadsheets, we'll kind of create them, and then we'll create them again real time and create them again. Not just because I found this, there's so many just unique variables in every property. But you're right, that would be, there's a lot of variables at play here that Reggie he just threw in a constant. Like, for instance, I mean, if you really care, if you want to nerd out on Excel for a second, there's a lot of variables at play. For instance, like this one here. No, where'd it go? This calculation here. If anyone who sees Excel, once you see a constant in an Excel cell document, you're like, why did he put in 56? He should have just thrown in the last cell here, or you have a total count somewhere showing the number of units, because that's what the variable is. Same thing when it comes to vacancy factors and all that other fun stuff. You can try to make it easier or more usable in the grand scheme of things. And that's the type of feedback as we pass you these things, guys. If you see this and we want to slowly form these things to be something super usable for you, at the same time, we want it to be flexible enough that it's gonna you guys can use it for each one of your deals, right? A 16 unit, a 150 unit, or whatever it happens to be. We'd like you guys to be able to mold these appropriately. So continue to give us feedback like that. Do you want to jump into the next tab, or before we jump into the next tab, any other questions, guys, on the rent matrix?
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
on rubs, so you guys are just taking the bills and dividing them up amongst the 56 units. Do you have a third-party administrator performing that for you, or?
No, so what we'll do for rubs, when it comes to utilities like water and electric, we'll typically take roughly an 80% value or 90% value of what the average power bill and water bill are, and we'll charge that as a constant per tenant. So we don't want to act like a utility company. The last thing you want to do is you do not want to charge more than the amount of water that you're being billed, because then you are now acting as a utility company because you're making money on water. And there's other regulations and issues that arise when you do that. So most people in the game, they're going to charge between 80% to 90% of that water bill. And then you'll figure out whatever sort of fair matrix it's going to be within the property. So this property is super streamlined. It's all 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And so you could easily just say, all right, guys, the average water bill is $10,000 a month, right? That's way too much. We'll say $5,000 a month.
Right.
5,000 a month total water bill. We have 56 units. We're going to say, all right, we're just going to straight up divide 5,000 divided by 50, divided by 56. Gosh darn it. We'll say B 67. Got $89 a month for water. All right. Okay. So that's the straight line division. Now it starts to get a little bit more cumbersome when you have 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms, or maybe 2 bedrooms that have a larger floor plan, and you have these different variances. So you can say, all right, we're not going to charge per bedroom, we're going to charge for number of tenants. And you can even do that here. The number of people who are living in the property, because they're using more water and more electricity, we're going to charge, all right, you have 3 people living here, so we're going to charge you, we're based on how many people are in the property, you're going to charge you this much for your rubs. And so Reggie just threw in here as a number. He was saying, okay, roughly $80 was his, here's my WAG of what we're going to charge for rubs based on what he saw for other income, and he's looking at the electric bill and everything. Okay. So he'll say, okay, $80 is my going in assumption for what we're going to charge for internet, water, and electricity. I think were the 3 rubs factors that you guys were considering last week. Anything else? Any other questions on this tab, guys?
Hey Matt, just to finish on rubs. So what does your lease say? Is it written in the new lease that you're going to implement the rubs model?
100%. That's why he doesn't account for any rubs until the leases are signed. And so those new leases will account for the rubs, and that's going to be specifically spelled out it'll be typically a number that's spelled out in the lease. All right, your market rent, your rent is $15.29, and you are paying an extra $80 a month for internet, water, and electricity. Yep.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anything else, guys? Cool. Any other questions in the chat? Make sure I didn't all those.
So the next tab that he had there, he basically said was his like chicken scratch.
The next tab is kind of what, let me see what Deepak was saying. Would it be good to make that year-over-year rent growth as a variable? Oh yeah, the variable, we talked about that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the next tab, I'll try to zoom in here so you guys can see. Again, this is bare bones Excel witchcraft here, but what this is Reggie's. Now we went from granular to a little bit more pulling back to more of a, it's called a 10,000 foot view of annual kind of projections going forward. So we have the rubs that he just pulled from the previous cell. We have the income that he pulled from the previous cell at the end of month 12. And that income, what this was his top row here is, it's always good to see what, again, take a step back and say, okay, how much are we actually increasing income? Like, how is this a realistic? If we're going from $400 a month to $1,400 a month and some, 300% increase in a year, is that a realistic increase? Even if the market demands it, is that actually realistic? Probably not, right? And so what Reggie did here, he compared it. So he said he went from whatever it was before, which is 777,000 to now 872,000. That's a 12% increase, which is, it's high. But if the market demands and there's high occupancy everywhere, then yes, that's a reasonable increase for your first year, especially as you're doing turns and if you're actually increasing the value of the property by rehabbing. The next year, he's showing a 7% increase, and then he did a flatline 3% increase in his assumptions from there. So you can kind of see how his market rent growth is going forward. His plan is there. Rubs, he stayed constant through all 3 years, but he did increase the income. Total revenue then is going to increase appropriately based on those variables. The next thing he did, he just cut it with an axe for expenses. He just said, all right, 50% is all I'm taking. So 50% of revenue is going to be my expenses, 50% operating expense ratio. Now you could, again, change that variable to whatever you want to be more conservative or liberal with your numbers. From there, you got his NOI. You just say revenue minus the expenses. You got your NOI. And then he jumped down into his budget. He said, okay, assuming we have 700 million or 7 million, here's our debt service every year, which he calculated based on that number as the balance of the note. And so he said, okay, here's our debt service every year, 333,000. That stays constant over every year. The next thing is going to be your net income, which is just going to be all three of these subtracted from each other. He doesn't have his capital budget built in here yet. CapEx or cap rate, he slowly increased the cap rate. You see every year of a 1/10%. To again, that's one way of being conservative. For me, I look more big picture. Do I think 4% cap rate's realistic or 4.4% cap rate? This is where I start to crush people's numbers. I'm like, let's go with 5.5%. Let's just see what it looks like. And because like it's more of a gut check thing. I struggle with projecting things out in such small increments, and I like to be more conservative. Then you got your cash on cash return, which is based on whatever number that Reggie was pulling from there. And then you got your value. So the value, he's just dividing the cap rate divided by the NOI, and that's how you get his value from there. And so you can see the value rise over time, hopefully, to justify your potential end game or refinance plan. So this is what he's saying here for his refinance loan balance, which is going to be a 70% of the current value. And then from there, he can figure out what is his cash out or what his cash position might be if you were to refinance at the different years. This is not anything crazy. This is super basic, cut it with an axe, but this is what we do sometimes just to get the basic numbers out there to see where we stand going into the future. Any questions on any of these numbers? So most of these should be pretty basic for you guys.
A lot of that information is going to be in the other more detailed analyzer as well. And
all of this will definitely
page,
be, yeah.
This page here is basically the P&L, just on a much more pushed back, larger,
super simplified. Yeah. So
yeah.
On a 12-month basis, that's what it's. Yeah.
The rent matrix is on a 12-month basis. So that's specific to the rent we're actually going to be collecting, right? That's more granular. That's the big thing we wanted you to see there. The second tab there that he didn't even name, is just like sheet 1, was just because that was kind of a very high level overview of the P&L. If we wanted to get more granular with it, we would just go to the P&L on the analyzer itself.
Is that what you're planning on jumping into next, Josh? Are you jumping in to build the pro forma out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions while Josh is pulling it up, guys? Anything up to now?
So I had a question, Matt, and
Yeah.
and obviously on that one that we were looking at, and especially on this analyzer that we always normally use. So I noticed that on that one and on all of them, it looks like you should try to get it all the rents moved up within that third year. On that particular sample that we were just looking at, it was ramped up right in the first and second year, because obviously the goal is that to refinance that in the third year, or was that one scenario for the fifth year refinance?
So that brings up a good point. I don't like to assume we're getting a market rent in the first year. This rent matrix showed that happening.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit unrealistic to assume that to be truly blatant with you guys. For me, I'd like to plan it out over 2 years. I think 2 years is a much more realistic time frame, especially if you're doing rehabs and things happen and whatever. Again, I like a 2-year time frame. The other thing, the reason I like a 2-year time frame is because if you are fully up to market rent by the end of 2 years, you then have 6 months to season it, and you can initiate your refinance at the 2.5 year mark. You can have your refi done by before the end of year 3 hits. Which is a comfortable pacing and timeline. I think a realistic pacing and timeline for me. Now, do we try to beat that? 100%. We still try to get market rent as soon as possible. It's a race to market rent every time you get a new property. However, with my pro formas, again, this is just my conservative nature. If we were going to be going back and forth with this as a partnership, I'd be like, hey, cool, that's great. I love your rent matrix. In a perfect world, that's exactly how it works out, right? Like that's that 100%. I'm on board. However, there's just so many variables at play, and I'll take that and I'll expand it over 2 years, because that's just there's just so many variables that happen. In a perfect world that does, but I couldn't even tell you all the variables that are going to come to play. Floods, shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had. I can show you some videos that we literally got today of some tenants in one of our apartment complexes walking by a ring camera with freaking AK-47s in the hand. I'm like, what the hell, guys? This is not the Middle East. Let's go.
I know, it's Montgomery, Alabama. All right, so I know that you guys have heard me review these analyses and review these deals, at least those of you that have been around for any length of time, or for those of you that are newer that actually went back and watched any of the underwriting videos. I've literally done this like 25, 26 times, that we have recorded videos of us going through the entire process of underwriting this. So you guys already understand, or could go back and watch and understand to see exactly how it is that I'll go through and underwrite this. So now that I actually have Matt here with us, I know he's trying to shove his face real quick before I make him talk again, but I would love for Matt to give his example scenario of specifically how he would go through this analyzer and underwrite it. So we already went through the scenarios tab. We don't have to do this, but jumping into the tabs that I like to focus on is summary, P&L, acquisition costs, and exit strategies. Returns, kind of everything else pretty much does it itself. But these 5 really, summary, and these are the ones that I primarily edit and focus on. So with that said, Matt, what do you usually do after you filled out the scenario section and done your rent matrix and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I run my numbers on. What I'll go to typically next is I'll go to summary. In the summary tab.
Did you want to run this actually?
Sure. Can you throw that in Slack just so I can pull it down really quickly?
It's in, oh geez, how do I do that? Look at me slacking. Get it?
Sorry, guys. Technical issues we didn't expect.
There it is. In Slack.
I thought it was funny, Josh.
What, Slack?
All right.
It's like these are those dad jokes. I do them all the time.
I love dad jokes, man. How I survive.
Right.
Dad jokes or severely inappropriate jokes. One of the
Yeah,
two.
Matt's the inappropriate joke kind of guy. You've said some pretty crazy things to all different types of people.
It's my fighter pilot background. Sorry, guys. If they come out, it's not personal. Okay, it's just the way I was raised.
Literally just some like random female walking along the street and he'll say something insane.
No, I'm not. Okay, so here we are with the analyzer. So after we filled out. Go, Mike.
No, there we go.
I was getting yelled at.
He was doing an example of what Matt does.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll jump into the summary tab from there, and I'll just again double check that everything is correct. I'll try to zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better here. So the first thing I want to do when I'm going here is I want to make sure I'm always populating all of these scenarios based off scenario 4. So when you go to the scenario 4 is going to be your offer. Sometimes I'll jump over the projection as well, but most of my things I'm running off scenario 4, meaning the offer. So that's what all the numbers are being pulled from. So you got 56 units, purchase price is the same, nothing crazy there. Down payment. You'll see this is anything in blue is editable, right? So 1% is typically what we go to is for the earnest money deposit. Closing costs, sometimes I'll increase that to 3%, but 2.7% is not that bad. And acquisition fee. This is one thing we'll fight about, and you guys will fight about in your partnerships for what do you guys charge for acquisition fees? Or do you charge any acquisition fees? It's going to be really come down to your personal situation. Realize that every dollar you raise and every dollar you take makes it that much more difficult when on the backside you then need to return that money or give returns on that money. And so it's a balance here, right? And if you're in a position where you need capital or you feel like you need capital, 100% go ahead and charge an acquisition fee. What is a fair acquisition fee? It depends on your position. Some people on our last deal they made, what was it, almost $500,000, not last deal, but in Mueller place, it was like $500,000 in the acquisition fee. And that was
that was like 5%.
It was a 5% acquisition fee. Yeah, it was a significantly large acquisition fee. I'll say typically you're going to see 2 to 3% is typical, sometimes 1%, sometimes a straight flat fee. My goal as an operator is to get to the point where we're charging no acquisition fee personally is my goal, because I want to get to the point where the cash flow is truly the focus. And we are then very, very truly aligned with our investors at that point where we don't make money unless they're making money. And that's kind of the goal that I want to get to. However, we're still in a point where we're still growing, and in order to grow, you need capital. And so like it's a balance, right? So just realize that it is what it is. You will have some investors that will not invest. I had some investors who want to invest with me, but it's just in their their decision matrix. If there's an acquisition fee, they will not invest, and that's completely fine, right? And it's completely fine. So just realize that it is a barrier to entry to certain investors, but beyond that, it's your own money. Like I tell my agents who are selling, right? You can charge whatever you want for your commission. I have some agents that'll charge 8% for a listing, other agents that'll charge 4%. And it's your money, and this is your chance to make money here. So just realize that's what it is. Again, there is a repercussion on the backside though, because you need to return it.
Yeah,
okay.
And I'll say that it's dependent on the deal, I guess, and depending on the operator. I haven't seen it be a huge issue when it comes to raising capital, because you guys probably heard that and you're like, oh shoot, well, I don't want to charge an acquisition fee now. It's gonna be hard to raise. It's not necessarily super difficult. Most deals that we've done, we've charged between 1% to 3%. It really depends on the size. Like if you're doing a really small deal and you charge 3% and it only equates to like 30 grand, it's like, okay, 30 grand ain't that bad. But like Matt alluded to, it does affect it on the back end. And I have had maybe a few investors, like it sounds like you have, Matt, that have just been like, nope, not interested. That acquisition fee seems kind of high. But for the most part, most people honestly don't even pay attention to it. Most people I talk to, they're just like, hey, what are the returns, man? Tell me what you got.
It's more the accredited savvy investors who really know what's going on, that they just have a very certain buy box, a certain investing box that they'll invest within, and it just doesn't meet their if-then statements. That's all. All right, repairs and reserves. Okay, this is where you start to see what is realistic with some of these numbers. So this is where I'll start to take it off of like, okay, like what are we doing in this one? So you see this one is, I'll start to edit cells over here. So I'll say, we got 1.1 million divided by 56. So we're looking at $20,000 a door ish. You should have.
Yeah, that's actually replacement reserves. Which
that's the full replacement reserves. That's that whole CapEx discussion. Sorry, this is like the big bucket of stuff. So this is an entirely different discussion. We could get into maybe here in a little bit. So I would try to double check what is a realistic number for that. A lot of times what it's going to be is like, how much really, we'll just jump into it now. All right. So for repairs and reserves, like what do I consider a confident reserves? I will go back to my scenario tab and I will see what the debt servicing is. And so assuming we buy this for this amount, we have a debt service here. a debt service of $579,000, right? So that's our debt service cost per year. So I like to see at least 6 months of debt service. So I'll say $579,000 divided by 2. So there's my initial reserve min that I want to see at least. I'm going to want to see an insurance deductible. So what's an insurance deductible going to be for an $11 million property? Typically going to be around 2%. So we'll go, I'll say 2.5% for a little buffer on there. So we got another $287,000 for a deductible, for some like catastrophic deductible. I want to make sure we have that on hand. And then from there, I'm looking at how much do I want to put into each one of these units. This one, from what I remember in the pictures last week, it looked pretty terrible. I'll be honest. I don't want to say terrible. It just looked really old, like it really needed refreshed. So we'll say $10,000 a unit there as well, which is going to be another $500,000. So altogether, we're looking at a sum total there of roughly $1 million-ish, a little over $1 million, 1.1 million. We're at 1.15. So altogether, to me, off the bat, I'm like, that's about right. You know, this doesn't include working capital. This doesn't include true reserves in that case. It doesn't include CapEx. So going from 1.137 to 1.5 is an extra 20 grand. That's probably about right. I'm pretty happy with that number. And I think Reggie last week, he's talking about, he says he takes 10%, right? 10% of his number is typically his WAG to go down there. And that's a good WAG, but that's how I'll go a little bit more granular to get a number that I'm confident with. We will get more granular and due diligence to make sure these numbers are accurate, right? We'll try to get contractors over there. Okay, what is an actual turn going to cost? Is it going to be 12 grand per turn? Okay, that's going to shift our numbers a little bit. Like, what do we need to do to change here? Okay, so that's the repairs and reserves. And then from there, you look at the total capital to close, nothing too crazy there. Now, this is one big number we're gonna hit on a lot. Is going to be the CapEx, the cap rate at resale. So this variable here, this 8% is what's gonna drive your exit strategy of what does the refinance look like when we go to refi. And so in the summary tab, we were looking at 4% cap rates. I like to add 1%. So if we're buying it at a 4 cap, or if the market is a 4 cap, for whatever asset class you're buying, I personally like to add 1%. That's just my kind of gut reaction. You can talk. Some people are going to say, 0.1% per year. But some people are going to say add a 0.5%, and that's going to be enough buffer over the course of a normal exit timeline of 5 to 7 years. Personally, I like to add 1%. Does that screw us out of deals? 100% it screws us out of deals, because an extra 0.5% cap rate on a larger property really reduces value. However, again, you can be as conservative or as tight as you want to be with when it comes to your numbers. This is where the art, not the science, comes into play of predicting numbers in the future. And this is exactly what you're doing. You're predicting the future. I predict a gloomy future. Josh has rainbows and unicorns in his future. All right. So
Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question. You said in your number that the repairs and reserve, it doesn't include CapEx. Is that what you said?
I said it didn't include reserves necessarily. We had a CapEx budget there. So we had our PIT, our principal and interest for 6 months. We had our insurance reserves, and we had our CapEx. I didn't necessarily include working capital. So working capital meaning like your normal monthly balance that's going to go up and down for your operating expenses that you're using and then get replenished, using and then get replenished. And so working capital is the one thing that wasn't added, but CapEx was.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, let's see here. Where were we? Gross scheduled monthly income. That's fine. This stuff really pulls directly from the calculator we're looking at. This is where I'll highlight. If Josh and Reggie send me an analyzer, I'll double check to see what is the actual vacancy and loss to lease. This one, you're looking at a 15% vacancy and a 15% essentially economic and physical vacancy. So 30% total. Which is very high because we're expecting to do some serious rehab in these properties. And exactly to, I think whoever we talked to earlier, is it Paul or someone brought it up, where we're like, is that realistic to have 1 year where we all of a sudden have market rent, at the end of the 1 year? Like you saw in his rent matrix, we weren't assuming a 30% vacancy at any point in the rent matrix. So that's where you'll start to see the disconnect here. And you're like, okay, that's why I will extend these things out to be a little bit more realistic in my mind.
But I think it's also good if you do the vacancy of 15%, because you're gonna have some investors, they're gonna wonder, well, I see, like you said, sunshine and rainbows. But what happens if you do have this higher vacancy? What happens if this, and you're baking it into this already, so it's good.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was it Derek that mentioned earlier where he's like, we have more than 50% month-to-month tenants. Like there's the likelihood we could be at 60% vacancy in day one. Unlikely, but it is a possibility. And so anyways, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I would much rather show conservative numbers to my investors. I'll occasionally show them a peek behind the curtain of like, here's the really good thing we could get to, but we're not going to talk to that. Let's talk to the more realistic kind of game plan. Okay. Expenses. This is one number I do highlight quite a bit. I want to see at least a 50% operating expense ratio. You'll see this is what Michael Blanc's analyzer highlights as well. Anything up below 50% in their kind of is, you may be missing something, or you're just extremely well run, or you're self-managing, or some other variable is just not considered in my mind. There. Okay. To do other things I look at here. Cap rate of purchase. So we can see we're buying at a 3.1 cap, and I'm running my refi at a 5 cap. Now, just because you're buying at a 3.1 cap with these current numbers, doesn't mean that's the market cap rate. Sometimes when you're buying a value add property, you're buying below the market cap rate, because you're planning on adding value and accepting the fact that you're buying it more expensive. What am I trying to say? You're buying it at a value that the market doesn't quite hold. No, what am I trying to say? Let's say for example, my RV park. When I bought my RV park, I bought it for $2 million at a 2% cap rate. Cap rate was stupid low. Like it was way overvalued based on the current NOI that it was producing. However, I know I was very, very confident I could bolster that NOI even higher, and I could reduce the crazy expenses. So I was able to take it from a $2 million valuation, and now we're probably at around a $3.5 or $4 million valuation at an 8% cap rate. So I didn't really care about the cap rate at purchase necessarily per se for that value add play, because it ultimately didn't matter. Like that it was so run against the norm that that cap rate ultimately really just didn't apply. And so I cared more about what is this thing gonna look like at the end. I care much more about this cap rate, like on my refinance and my sale, than I do at the actual purchase cap rate. Does that make sense, guys? Understanding that? Okay.
So the seller is maybe trying to grab some of your improvement, and that's why the cap rate is lower. Is that what you're saying? Or?
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, ultimately, I want to always buy with the highest cap rate possible, right? That means the lowest value. That's always my goal. I want to buy at a 20 cap if I can. But the there are scenarios where you're going to be buying. There may be scenarios where you're buying, especially with value add properties, where you're buying below current market cap rate, because you're confident you can justify operations to get NOI to the point, even with a higher cap rate, you're still at a significantly higher valuation. So that's what I say. I do care about the cap rate of purchase. It's gonna affect the appraisal. It's gonna affect just the perception of investors. It's gonna affect things in that regard. But if you can justify the end game, hey guys, I understand we're buying this at premium dollar right now, but here's why I'm accepting this premium dollar because of this. Boom, we're going to be able to get to X, Y, and Z, and here's how we're going to be able to justify that. All right. Let's see here. Cash on cash average. This isn't here because the pro forma is not built out yet, so we'll show that.
Just on the purchase price, sorry, is there the concept of concessions like in single family where, okay, I'm the seller, I know the roof is bad, I'm not going to fix it, but I want to maintain a high sales price, but I'll give you a concession, which may or may not be reflected in that sales price, but in terms of cash that you bring to closing, you know, you are getting a more attractive deal, but then you end up having to fix it yourself, right? So
100%. I mean, it's even more flexible than the residential world when it comes to the commercial space. Like your concessions, and you can be even more creative with the way it works. Absolutely. All right, let's see here. Cap rate of purchase, we talked through that. Debt service coverage ratio. So debt coverage ratio, this is going to be something that's going to drive a lot of the lending decisions. So if you're looking at if you're actually looking at a 0.61 debt coverage ratio, you're going to need some sort of bridge lender that really just understands what your game plan is, because no conventional lender is going to lend at a 0.61. That means you don't have enough money to pay the bills. All right, and the reason this is so low, cap rate purchase and everything, is because we're assuming a 30% vacancy based off their market number. So we're looking at super low numbers right here. Okay, member equity. So this is where you can start to mess with it from the investor, from the general partner, the sponsor perspective. This is where you can start to tweak the numbers. Okay, like what does it look like with a 70-30 split? Okay, what does it look like with an 80-20 split? And you can start to see from a big picture perspective how this is going to affect how much meat is on the bones for your investors. So that's where we'll start to kind of tweak these numbers to see, and that's ultimately where that conversation is going to begin for what is this deal going to be? 60-40, 80-20, 90-10, who knows? And then you start to split it up from there. All right, preferred return to the manager or to the member. So this is where you throw pref. So this is where you start to work the pref numbers out as well. So 8% pref or whatever happens to be. Asset manager fee. So this is your ongoing asset management fee. This is something I do recommend charging because you guys don't realize if you've not jumped into the game yet, it is a metric crap ton of work to asset manage a property, especially the value add properties. The ones that are A-class turnkey, sure, you can justify a lower asset management fee. But this number here, just realize this is how you're getting paid on an ongoing basis. And this is also a number that's when times are tight and times are tough when it comes financially to the property, this is the first number that's going to go away. The first person you're going to stop paying typically is yourself. You're going to pay your investors over yourself 9 times out of 10 to keep your investors happy, and to ultimately that's your job as a fiduciary to make sure that their money grows.
So is that a percentage of the value, or is it of the income or the revenue?
Percentage of the monthly income.
Monthly income.
Yep. Capital transaction fee. So this is something we don't typically charge, but this is something you can charge. So if you do have a refinance, this is all your work to get ready for the refinance and the refinance itself and go through. So if you have a capital event such as a sale even, or a refinance, you can make money, an additional percentage based on the that refi amount or the sale amount, if you like. We don't typically charge that, but so you'll see all these little cutout fees, right? You see the acquisition fee, you'll see the capital transaction fee, you'll see the asset manager fee, and these are the things that savvy investors are going to be like, dude, you're making a lot of money for just doing your job here, right? Like ultimately, the value that you bring in should be from this portion right here, the manager equity. That's where you should be. You should be happy with and comfortable with, and that should be your big payday. So ultimately, you should be able to ideally justify these payments to be as low as possible between the acquisition fee, capital transaction fee, and the asset management fee. I'll say with the exception of asset management fee, that one is just an ongoing, you getting paid to do your job. But really capital transaction fee and asset management acquisition fee there. Okay. These numbers look so wonky right now. I don't know why they're so low, Josh. What did I miss something to where this analyzer is like so ridiculously crappy right now?
We haven't touched the P&L yet, so it probably
okay.
still shows we're making 1145 10 years.
Okay, cool. So from there, I'll jump into the P&L. So the P&L now is where we start to build out the actual pro forma. Typically, we have these built out. So when it comes to me, Josh and Reggie have already built out the expenses, and these expenses are going to show and they're going to come across the board. This is where I'll start to tweak individual expenses for the deals. But we'll start from the top here. Top. Is it realistic to assume that forever 3% rent increases are going to be the future? What do you guys think? I think it's an honest question.
No.
No? What have rent increases been for you guys in the past 2 years?
Significant.
What is significant, Paul? Give me a number.
About 5%.
Oh, 5%. That's not significant. We saw 25%, 35% in some of our properties, right? Like that's significant, almost damn near doubling in some different counties. Is 3% realistic? 3% is the historical norm. Looking back now, has it dipped below that? For sure. Has it spiked way above that? Absolutely. I think it's a realistic number. Sometimes, depending on my mood, I might drop it down to 2% in the long-term pro forma. But whatever. 3% seems to be the industry average for long-term assumptions for increasing factor. You'll see an annual rent escalator of 3% and an annual expense escalator of also 3%. Do we think expenses are going to also increase at 3% per year? Maybe, right? But this is where I'm going to tweak it on the near term for my first couple of years, my first 3 years. After that, I'll just go with the normal. So my recommendation or my strategy here when I'm looking at the pro forma, I will be manually manipulating my escalators for the first 3 years based on current market conditions, current economic conditions, all that fun stuff. But after year 4, I have no idea what's gonna be happening in 3 years. What were you guys doing 3 years ago? You probably weren't even thinking about what you're doing today, right? Like it's crazy what can change in 3 to 4 or 5 years. And so after 3 years, I'm going to assume the standard, the historical average of 3%, and that's the best we can do in my mind. Okay. From there, average monthly rent. This is where what I'll do, I will actually manipulate these a little bit in the cells. I'm going to say, okay, no rent escalators we got in there. So this is where I'll start to manipulate the cells as needed. So what you saw in the previous one, so 1529, and then I think he said he went up like 7% was his assumption from there. Then after that, he had a 3% increasing escalator. So that's how I would edit these cells to start to reflect the numbers that we start to assume. Gross potential income is all there. This is also where I'm going to start to manipulate the vacancy and concession. So first year, when we're doing all this stuff, I'm looking at 30% total. Okay, next year, I might throw in a 10% here and a 5%. So we're looking at maybe we'll have 12% and 7%, something like that. And then I might go 10% and 5%, and then maybe 10% and 2%. Something like that would be like how I would normally manipulate it to going forward conservatively in my mind. I'm not going to assume anything less than a 12% total economic and physical vacancy factor. But this is where like Josh and Reggie might be like, dude, 8% is good enough. And this is where we'll have an internal battle of what we're going to assume, what we're going to present to our investors. And so this is where you'll build it out inside the pro forma right there. Other income, you can see if you want to actually have this change, that right now it's escalating with the factor. So these are these little things that are going to make a big difference in NOI and value. You want to make sure you understand what's going on in your spreadsheets. Like the way that Reggie put out in his breakdown, we didn't expect other income to increase by 7%, like the way it's shown here. We might want to actually just copy and paste. So you'll see when you start to, no, not that, sorry. Let's copy and then just paste the value. All this to say, as you start to manipulate these, realize what I like to do. I'll take any cell that I manipulate and ruin the formula. I'll take it and I'll highlight an orange. That just highlights to me that I've changed it, and highlights to Josh and Reggie that I've changed it. So if and when we go to manipulate our cells again, they realize that they've been changed. Also highlights the fact that once you guys get an analyzer you like, save the original, and then always make a separate copy for any other future changes, because it's always you're gonna manipulate for everyone. It's gonna be changing, and you're gonna mess up the calculations sometimes. Okay, that's that for the top portion of the income. That's how I'll manipulate those. Next, I'll basically break down expenses line by line based on what I'm thinking. I know you guys talked last week about real estate taxes and what that might look like. I know Reggie talked about how that's affected in arrears, and so that is something I'll account for manually here. And then from there, I'll just go with some standard increasing based on the 3% increase. Insurance as well, obviously a huge factor right now. It's a tough one to justify, but that's one I might actually show decreasing in the future, maybe, or at least staying steady. Maybe I won't show that increasing, hopefully. And then everything else is going to be your gut feeling on how you want to change it for the first year or two, however you want to justify that, and then you're going to go to some sort of steady state increasing. Most of it's not like I manipulate every expense, but there's certain ones I will address specifically in that. Cool. Faster, funnier. I know we got a couple more minutes here. So at the bottom, this is when I start to look at the NOI. This is where you start to see from your distribution standpoint. All right, with a 70% going to the managers, 30% going to the GP, you can see, hey, what do deficiencies start to look like? Deficiency meaning you don't have enough money to pay your investors. That's what that deficiency is. And you ideally, sometimes you're going to accept a year one deficiency. However, ideally you're cooking 0 deficiencies into your numbers there. So this is where one number that we are going to highlight quite a bit, and we'll talk about deficiency quite a bit amongst Josh, Reggie, and I. Yeah, this is tougher to see when we don't have all the actual numbers in here. But anyways, that's how I'm going to peruse through the P&L and build it out through that. The next cell that I'm really going to care about, and I'm going to talk through this quickly for you guys, is the exit strategies. So the exit strategies is going to help us define how we look at our perpetuity model. So I really don't care about the sale as much with the perpetuity model. I care much more about the refinance. And so if I'm going to refinance at year 3, I'll throw that in there, and I'll throw in just a sale at year 10 because I don't really care about the sale as much. I care much more about the refinance. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my LTV and the refinance. Typically going to assume about a 70%, sometimes 65%, sometimes 80%, depending on the asset class and when you're talking to your lenders. And then from these numbers, you can see how much of your investment is being returned upon the refinance. Again, these numbers are all jacked up for whatever reason right now, but this is where I want to see ideally 100% being returned to my investors on the refi. That's why I know we're hitting the perpetuity model. So in my mind, if we're able to refinance, we're able to do a cash out refinance and get 100% of the investors' money back to them. That really hits it on the mark for me with our perpetuity model, assuming my conservative numbers meet my conservative metrics are met within the P&L there. And that's that. This is really ultimately where I land. I'm like, if we hit this, I am happy to greenlight the deal and greenlight the LOI and continue to press forward with the deal. This is where the rubber meets the road for me. After all is said and done, I come to this number right here.
It looks like we're just paying too much for the property. We're paying 11.5 what for it? Then the actual valuation doesn't look like it comes close.
Yeah. So if we go back to the scenarios, if we change it to I don't know, 6 million, 600,000 is probably still great. Damn it, add another 0. All right. Boom, that looks great, 100%. So this is where you can really start to manipulate the numbers if you want. You go back to the scenarios. Okay, let's see what it looks like at 7 million. Exit strategies, 82%. So like literally, this is what I'll do. I'll manipulate, assuming I'm happy with everything else. What's left? What's the variable at play left is really going to be the purchase price. So it might be we'll call it 6.7 million. And go back to hedging strategies. Look at 91%. Let's try 6.4 million. A little trial and error for funsies here. 99%. All right, there we go. So we got our number of roughly 6.4 million. So going in argument now, I'd be like, all right, sweet guys. My initial offer might come in at 6 million. Hey, I know you're asking 11.5. We're willing to pay 6. Take it or leave it. I mean, we don't say take it or leave it, but you know that's the starting argument. Knowing we're going to build in a little room that we can come up a little bit in that. And we also know we're really far split with the seller at this one. Doesn't mean we won't engage, but we can then have a conversation with the broker saying, bro, you're asking 11.5. We got a $6 million to really justify our game plan. Now our game plan is more conservative than traditional syndicator that's just going to flip the property after 5 years. They're allowed to have a little bit less meat on the bones for their deals. So even knowing that, you could be like, oh man, like this is a struggle. Like, is there any way we can make this happen? Or maybe we can get creative. Maybe we can go, $6 million purchase with another $2 million in seller financing at 0%. Like, then you can start to work the numbers there creatively. Like we can get to $8 million with some sort of creative deal. Or, if you can do 100% seller financing with some insanely low interest rate, you can start to work, more creative financing deals in that sense. And so not all numbers are driven directly off this because, if we do seller financing, all of these numbers are going to shift. Debt service coverage ratio is going to shift. And so like everything will shift from there. But at least that's my starting block. I'm going to go all the way through that. I'm going to get to the exit strategy. I want to get to this 100% return capital on the refi. And that's just personally how I kind of drive the fight there. Questions? That was me talking for a long time. Comments, concerns? Anyone awake still?
I have a question, Matt. So,
Yeah.
The perpetuity model is awesome, and that makes a lot of sense to be conservative. But my question is, like, in reality, in very hot markets like 2029, 2020, it's going to be very difficult to get a deal, right? Compared to, flip, as you said, people who will just flip the deal in 3 years that need less meat on the bone. What are your thoughts on that? Are you
100%
about being
that is a known byproduct of trying to force this perpetuity of models on us. And I will say, because we have the perpetuity model, it's probably saved us. Honestly, we might have lost a deal. Like we might have lost the 148 unit that we're currently doing with all of the trauma that we've had in that property between floods and lawsuits and shootings and fires and whatever homeless people and freaking bed bugs. Like we've had every calamity almost damn near known to man. has happened to this portfolio. And the reason that we were able to stay afloat and still have this property in our hands and still keep it rolling was because we bought it with so much meat on the bones. When we bought it, I think our break-even occupancy was like 52% or something like that, right? Like, and we've tested that. Like, we've gotten down to that damn number, and we were still afloat. You know what I mean? And so if I was a normal syndicator, I'll say normal syndicator, and the fact that I'm a traditional 5-year flipper, I don't think we would be in the same position. I think I would paid more, our debt service would be higher, and we'd be in a position that we'd be really, really hurting right now, and or might have had to give up the property. All that to say is I'm okay losing deals, knowing that there's so many unknowns in the future. I would rather be prepared for the unknowns when they do drop out. And that's just the nature of the beast. And I will happily accept not taking a deal on that doesn't have the meat on the bones. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, makes sense.
Let's see. Do we have any other questions that I missed up there? A WAG is a wild ass guess. What is a WAG? Oh yeah, sorry if that's not a term. What's a WAG? Is there a reason the debt yield is not currently not included as a key indicator? There's so many. What I'll say to that is there's a lot of variables and indicators you can use. Like we're already at time. What we can show you next week, or maybe one of these weeks, we can show you our asset management metrics, our KPIs that we've revamped recently and are using for our property manager kind of tracking. And I freaking love them. Reggie's developed this one snapshot thing that I freaking love. And it simplifies everything. But it's different metrics than normal people. I don't say normal people, that a lot of other people are using. And so all that to say is you can really hone in on a specific metrics. Like, for instance, even when you're looking at comps, like Reggie will look at price per square foot, where I'll look at more bedroom. And so neither are incorrect necessarily. It's just a different way to look at things. And so debt yield is not a bad indicator to use. It's just one other indicator that I just choose not to emphasize in my personal analysis. Also wondering if you guys use Argus. Is there a point where you'd recommend getting a, I don't know what Argus is. What is Argus, Josh?
I don't know. Let's look it up. It's a long-tailed pheasant.
Yeah.
Yes, we can
Found in
ask Ethan.
Southeast
Ethan, you still up?
Asia.
What's Argus? Tell me, educate me.
Yeah, still on. I guess it's basically just kind of like a forecasting software that we're using in like commercial real estate. So I have it at work right now, and the reason why I was asking is because I was actually on Argus and using it. So something like what did you call it? Like the tenant matrix, where you had like each unit and you're forecasting the future. Like Argus does that incredibly well, where you could set market assumptions and basically say upon lease expiration, you're going to have a month of downtime, you're going to release it, and rent's going to increase by 3%. So it's just kind of like an easier way of doing it. But I know that the licenses can get kind of expensive, and you also kind of have to be trained how to use it. So I was wondering if it's something that you guys implemented as well.
No, I mean, I think that's something for larger teams or brokerages. I think it sounds like a great tool to use. I'm a huge proponent of bootstrapping as much as you can, as long as you can. And so, meaning I don't like spending money unnecessarily. If you have a tool that gets the job done, just we'll say to a similar efficiency, then I'm much more of a proponent of just using that. However, as you grow teams to be more bulky or larger teams, like if we get to the point where we have, 700 million in assets under management and we have a whole crew, like, sure, I'm sure we're going to start to implement a lot of these more formalized programs. But the way we are now, you can see a lot of our stuff is bootstrapped, like the way we kind of come up with our thought process in our solutions. But that's great. It's good to know what's out there. I obviously I wasn't even aware of Argus as a potential solution. So thanks for bringing it up. Yeah,
it's pretty big at big companies, and obviously like I do asset management like full time, and for us, like we use our Argus models as like our 10-year cash flow projections that we share with investors.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm sure it presents some beautiful images you can share and stuff too. That's just it. Yeah, I think that's just for a different level that we're not currently operating in.
Got it.
Yeah, more free, or so to say. You guys are getting all this information that we've already spent lots of time putting together, and you're not having to keep up with licenses. I guess is our plan, but it is 8:03. We say 8:03 my time, probably 7:03 most people's time. So that finishes out for today. We'll reconvene next Monday on 26th of June, where we'll be covering the next section of basics. And then the following Thursday will be basically part 3 of this underwriting. And Reggie will be back with us. He's our forensic accountant, so he'll probably have some kind of new data or something for us to go over, either specifically this deal, or we'll have a new deal that we'll cover, and we'll go over some kind of new metric, how to come up with that, or some kind of new system to utilize it.
Yeah, next Monday is going to be branding and marketing. Josh is going to teach you all the wizardry and tricks there, guys. So get excited.
I've literally had like 3 combos with a few of you just today. You know who you are, literally about branding and marketing. So it seems like it's a lot of people ready and needing it.
Oh, so, sorry. Was there another question that I wanted to bring up from the Slack channel? I can't remember. Just, I know we're over time, guys. Just give me 1 second. I feel like there was something from the Slack channel I wanted to address that someone asked.
I think that was me.
Oh, was that you? What'd you ask?
Pulling it up.
I feel like I asked a few different things, but I think it was about how, talking to brokers for someone. I was talking to one earlier and he asked me how many deals I had, and I was like, I don't want to bullshit you. I'm just going to be honest. But as far as leveraging this group, this mastermind with you guys who are experienced and other people from around the country, does that hold any weight with, I mean, I know it's worth a shot, but I'm just saying, is that, or a way to bring it up to them to where
Yeah, that was a great point. And so absolutely, I think you can definitely leverage us as a group. It's one of the benefits of being part of this group. So you can say, yeah, I'm part of a mastermind where we collectively we'll tackle groups together, and we have deals in California, we have deals in in Southeast United States, we're really deals throughout the U.S. that we've tackled together as a group. And so you don't need to say, I personally have not done a deal. You can say, I'm part of this group and we've done this deal, and you're not wrong by saying that. Right. We can pull the knowledge from Derek. We can pull the knowledge from Paul. We can pull the knowledge from Greg and Chris, and we can pull the knowledge from everyone here. And so you're not lying by saying we have tackled these deals, and that'll just help hopefully bring more deals to you.
Yeah, I would 100% utilize being in something like this with every broker that you talk to. But I think when it's going to really hold the most amount of weight is when they actually know someone in the group, like when they know someone that's in it, or they've heard of them, or they've worked alongside one of us. Especially you living in Spanish Fort. I mean, the brokers you're probably talking to are the same brokers I talk to every day. So if you mention the fact that
can I drop Ferrari on them?
Yeah, just
sure.
mention that you're in a group with us, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I know those guys. And then I'm sure that'll give you some instant credibility.
Okay. I won't speak for the rest of the group, but for me, Josh and Reggie, you can 100% drop our names. I mean, without a doubt, feel free to do that. I'm not going to say, go ahead and drop Paul's name, because Paul may not want you to drop his name somewhere else. But for everyone else, I mean, start to create your little tribes, guys, and absolutely, like together, we should be stronger than you are by yourself. Absolutely.
You can say my name.
I was gonna say, maybe I'll earn false trust one day. I don't know.
I'm hoping in a week that my website will be finished. You can be like, yeah, you can go on his website too.
There you go. Which we'll talk a lot about that on Monday with branding.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll talk more of that other stuff too. A lot of it was credibility indicators, which I think we're going to talk to with Josh will talk on Monday with talking to brokers and stuff, which is part of the branding and marketing. So thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Sweet. Y'all have a good weekend. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.